All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Deep Dive. Today we're kicking it off with a new host. Obviously, I'm your boy Practical, and then we got coming in for the first time Rex.
How's it doing, guys? Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be good to have some back and forth instead of just me like vomiting onto the microphone all some bullshit and whatever there.
Makes it fun.
Yeah, so this episode's going to be about Blink-182's most recent album, One More Time. Came out October 20th of 2023. Obviously, we're using that as the jumping off point for the third episode just because the album was kind of a long-awaited reunion between, Mark, Travis, and Tom. Finally got over chasing aliens and wanted to do some new Blink-182 shit, I guess.
I think he's still chasing him while he's doing Blink.
Definitely. Dude always
Don't
seems
think
like
that
he's
guy
a
will ever
fucking
stop.
space cadet. Yeah. So we're going to just do a track-by-track analysis. Rex is a huge Blink-182 fan, so
Absolutely.
going to let him do a lot of the leading in this episode, and I'm just going to do kind of my general thoughts on each track. We got 17 tracks on this one. Bit of a bloated album for me, like I was saying on the way.
Absolutely. I think that is a fair thing to say.
Yeah. It's not, I traditionally don't like super long albums. There's obviously that kind of stuff in like hip hop, and some of, the greatest albums of all time might be a little bit lengthy, but if you utilize that space well, then it pays off. But I think a lot of time bands think they can just cram it in there and it'll be cool because it's a lot of content, but it isn't always quality.
No, I absolutely agree. I feel like this is where it is important on the cutting room floor when you decide what goes on your album. You have to make sure if you're going to go this long that it has some kind of cohesion to it and they don't sound like you put B-sides on the album. If you're going to do that, just a deluxe edition or, do a B-sides album.
Yeah.
Eminem, an example, did Music to Be Murdered by the B-sides. Things he didn't think made it to the album, but were still worth releasing.
Yeah, I agree. Or, if you're going to do it, then maybe go the full 9 and overbloat it and make it like a double album like Smashing Pumpkins' Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, which is kind of a lot of filler in retrospect, but...
Too long, but they were going for something big.
Yeah.
And I think they still paid it off. They still pulled it off. People to this day still find that album to be absolutely incredible. So.
Yeah, I've always been a huge fan of it, so I think it's okay for bands to take that approach,
It's
but if you're going to do it like this. Yeah, exactly. All right, and then we're going to just kick off talking about this album, I guess, with me saying that I just, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I think it could have been a lot better, especially for the wait for a reunion coming off those 2 albums with Matt Skiba, and everybody kind of wanted old school Blink back. I think in a lot of ways it failed to deliver, and I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion, but it is my opinion for sure.
I don't disagree with you at all. I feel they leaned too much into trying to be who they were instead of just being what they can be, which, they've all done separate projects. And for whatever reason, every time they get together to do an album, they separate their songs a lot. Like Tom has a song that sounds like an Angels song. There's the song with Tom or with Mark and Travis that sounds like Plus 44, and then sometimes you get a good mix of them. But I feel like they kind of, since they've got back together, have separated their music, even still on the albums. And I think even in this one, they've done it while trying to incorporate old Blink, but it didn't, I don't think it panned out.
Yeah, I agree. I had some of those same thoughts as I listened to it in the 12 times I listened to it in. And I appreciate aspects of it and a lot of parts here and there throughout, like peppered in maybe. But there's almost no songs on the whole that I'm really stoked about or I want to throw on, because I do the artist playlist where if it's not one of my favorite bands of all time, and Blink is one of those examples, like I like them, but they're not incredible to me and they've had a lot of lows. So when I'm reviewing an album in my head for like what I like about it, I kind of like to you know, put which songs stood out the most onto an overall artist playlist. And then that way, when I'm in the mood, I can go back and listen to that. And I think that'll be an ongoing theme for me when we talk about music and albums is like, was this playlist worthy, or was there enough songs that to me still sounded like the artist I like, but, you know, also maybe dared to be different here and there, like the acoustic track on here, just stuff like that, you know, like,
Absolutely, yeah.
and I think there's a couple for sure, but out of the 17 tracks, I mean, I don't know that, you know, it's maybe like 3, 4 of them maybe, and to me that could have been squeezed into an EP.
So my biggest problem here with this album, and I think it's the album's overall problem, is who wrote the album. So if we're looking at this new album, there's about, I think, 10 other writers on the album. There's Aaron Rubin, who helped Tom DeLonge on Angels and Airwaves before. We've got Nick Long, who co-wrote MGK's newer album, his Tickets to My Downfall. We've got Ryan Redder, who's helped Taylor Swift. He's the One Republic vocalist. You know, he's helped write stuff. And of course, we've got Robert Smith of The Cure. So these are all people who have helped collaborate on the album to help write it. So if you go back to their previous albums with Tom, specifically, we'll talk about we'll talk about the Untitled album. It's my favorite. It's a great written album. The only other songwriter on there is Robert Smith, because he's featured on the album, so I guess it makes sense. But it was all written by Tom, Mark, and Travis. We moved to Neighborhoods. There's only one other writing credit on the album. It's for the Ghosts on the Dance Floor, and it's the guy who produced the album is something Newell. I can't remember right now, but still, Blink with the original 3 members have always written their own music. Where now we have an album where they have many writers on it. So I think the organic part of Blink kind of got faded away in that. Bringing so many writers, I think it kind of can dilute things because they're there to write a certain type of song instead of how Blink would naturally do it. I don't know if many people know this, but Feeling This on their Untitled album, Mark and Tom went into separate rooms, one to record the verse, the other to record the chorus, or to write them, I mean. They didn't talk about what they were going to write about, but they both came out writing about sex. Probably not too far out of the realm for these guys, knowing them, but you know, the song came together as it was organically. They went and wrote it in separate rooms. Like, it just shows what can happen when you let it naturally come out, you know. And I think these other writers, although the album isn't terrible, I think it took a big toll on the album.
Yeah, no, definitely. I didn't know that about that song, but that's pretty interesting, and that does kind of seem to speak to their friendship in a lot of ways, which is actually kind of cool.
But super cool.
I you know, overall, I kind of think that the album production is where it really starts to hit some issues. But I do agree about the writing thing as well, because, and that's something you see in bands that have either been around for way too long, or they're so big that they got to keep figuring out new ways to be popular. Yeah. So they'll bring in these expert songwriters that, you know, have written songs for like fucking Taylor Swift and Beyonce and shit. And they're like, all right, well, how can we keep Blink poppy? How can we keep them also appealing to their original fan base, but maybe the poppy lover, just the pop rock music lovers, you know, like you got to get that when you're a pop rock band. And if you know, if you're not used to writing like that after such a long time and you want to stay relevant, I can see that angle. I don't agree with it, but I mean, like, you know, you're going to do what you're going to do when you're a band like Blink, because you got all these expectations now with the original members of the band, and that's what everyone wants to hear. So, you know, my only critique is still just one trick pony fucking Travis Barker, even still on this album, bro. It's the same.
you and Travis Barker, dude. It is hilarious every time. I love it.
It's just my thing, dude. Like, he's overrated as hell to me. I don't think he's a bad drummer, like I've told you, but, you know, it's just the same shit. There's this fucking heavy tom roll on every song, and it's like, good for you, dude. Where's some innovation in these drum beats, you know? And like, it's not that it's not there for him. He has his moments, but I just feel like it's not enough. I don't know.
I mean, I feel kind of the same nowadays for Mark. If you listen to his other albums, earlier ones with Untitled, Neighborhoods, Plus 44, lyrically he's a lot better. He's a good writer. But then we fast forward to the California era with Matt, and then we come to this album, and his solo tracks just aren't the same heavy hitters they used to be. Neighborhoods, he had Hearts All Gone, arguably one of the best and heaviest tracks on it. And it's odd because they all recorded that album in separate places. They never recorded that album together, really, not many of the songs, besides Mark and Travis. So it's not surprising the song came out sounding more like a Plus 44 song. But lyrically, the song was absolutely fantastic. We move on to the EP right after that, right before they broke up, Dogs Eating Dogs. The title song is the same thing. It's very well written. It's good. It speaks to all of Mark's strengths. And now we're moving on to California and all these. And I feel like up to now, and especially with the writers, either he's lost it or just doesn't want to do it anymore. I'm not sure which one. And I arguably think he's the best member of Blink. It used to be Tom when I was younger, but age imbues wisdom.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think they're one of those bands, though. I mean, I don't mean this in an insulting way, but bands for me like Blink-182, Offspring, Weezer to some extent, they're going to get to a point where, you know, their expectations are too high because they have such a huge legacy. Or Green Day, that was another one I was trying to pop into my head there.
Absolutely.
All the same type of stuff. I know Weezer's not really a pop punk band, but like they have the same meteoric rise and kind of, you know, they drop off at a point, like they plateau. And Blink is one of those bands to me personally. Like, I don't think that means they should stop, but maybe reinvent the wheel. And then I obviously understand you're going to have that spin around where if they do that, people are going to be like, they're too different now. And, you know, they're not Blink-182 anymore. And I get that too. But like being a big metal fan and progressive rock fan and stuff, I like when bands kind of maybe tread new territory and don't always try to put out the same album. For Metallica, for example, you have that solid fan base where it's like, it's the first four and nothing else for me. It's like, well, you want like fucking 7 more albums that sound identical to that? I don't understand that expectation personally, but
I don't either, and it happens in everybody. You know, there's a lot of people that Dude Ranch is where they topped out, and you know, I've listened to Buddha, Fly Swatter, their old one, all that stuff, all the way up, and I can tell you 100% without a doubt, Dude Ranch is back. I do not care for it. It has its place. Like there are songs out of them specifically I like, but you can call it hitting commercial or whatever you want to call it, but if you look on the Enema soundtrack as well, there's, I think, one other writer, and it's Jerry Finn, and it's their old producer that used to do all their music. But they still were able to write that album, and it was amazing. It was great, and everything before that is okay to me. Like, they were more punkish, and maybe that's where I don't care as much for it, is they leaned way more into the punk, like play really fast, sing, you know, it doesn't really have to sound like it goes together, which is cool. Like I said, there's some songs I like from it, but overall, it's just not my favorite era of Blink. I mean, honestly, Take Off Your Pants and Jacket to Neighborhood is my favorite, probably 3 albums. Not in that order. But I think that block, even though it's a pretty big block, about 10 years, I think that right there, even after their breakup, I think Neighborhoods, widely panned, was really good in retrospect.
yeah. I mean, I didn't like that album at the time either, but like I said, I'm just not a big fan of theirs. But I do agree that found more of their original sound than this album does. And having that long break in between, you'd think they would be striving more for that. Like, I brought that Dance With Me song up to you.
Yes.
I think that song sounds exactly like the old Blink to me in a perfect way, the way Tom is doing the verses and the way the guitars come in, and just, it's really tasty, I guess, if I can use that word for
Absolutely.
it. But,
absolutely.
and then it just goes to shit with that chorus to me, and I don't know why. And like I said in the car, like, He fucking sounds like he's saying mole, like from Goldmember and shit, before he does that. And I don't know if that's an intentional Tom DeLonge-ism, so we can talk about it or whatever, but...
It could be. I mean, the beginning, the first thing he says on the song is, when I teach masturbation, I just tell him, have fun with it. So it's in line with something he would do, but my real question is, who gave them the okay on this? Like, I know Blink is so big, a lot of producers and the bigwigs don't involve themselves because they usually take care of themselves at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But who said, ole, 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 it was a good idea? Like,
No, yeah.
Blink-182 is not, I don't feel, is known for great choruses. Like, they're Untitled, my favorite album, they have a song that just says, go, 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 go. Another one that's down, 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 down. Like,
Yeah.
they've never been huge on making the greatest choruses. So
And it doesn't
feel
need to be, but
it doesn't. Those songs are great, but my point is like that one is one where they should have been like, no.
yeah, like it just sounds lame. It doesn't sound like old Blink, and it doesn't sound like it would just be a pop punky thing to do or whatever. I mean, I'm always going to throw that term around for them. I don't necessarily put them in that box completely. They are in that box, but like I don't think that's the best description of them as a whole. But another thing that I was going to mention, actually calling back to something you said earlier, though, was the Robert Smith thing. And there's a couple tracks that sound musically like The Cure. Like there's two tracks in particular, and I mean I'd have to go into my trusty little notebook here to remember what they were, but I know I brought them up as I was listening to it, and obviously I'm a huge Cure fan, so I love it. And he did write one song and was on one song on Self-Titled too, right?
Yeah, it was the Holly.
Yeah. And yeah, I love that song too.
It's a great song.
But,
it's a great song.
Yeah. So like kicking back to what you said about the multiple writer thing though, like that is kind of damning in a lot of ways, because I think it leans to the production that I brought up earlier where their voices are too auto-tuned. And look, I know people are going to say like, yeah, they're older, so they're going to need help in the studio, and what band doesn't? And it's not that I have a problem with that. It's just you can hear it multiple times on the album in their voice tracks where it just sounds like such heavy programming, and I'm baffled at why they would want that sound. But
So it's a great thing to bring up because you're absolutely correct. Their voices are very overproduced, but I think in part it's because Mark had that cancer. He had lymphoma.
oh yeah.
I believe, don't quote me on that, but he got cancer for a while, and he said that before he started doing the album, or at least the singing part, he had to get a vocal coach because the chemotherapy had just destroyed his vocals. So he had to get a vocal coach, and he said he basically had to relearn how to sing, which, again, they've never been the best singers. You ever seen Blink-182 live, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're more about the show than they are about matching the album. If you've ever been to a Blink show, sometimes they'll tell you, if you want to listen to the album, go and buy it. Like, no, they're great live, but I think that probably attributed to it, like Mark struggling to kind of hit that point again, at least get there to where he can sing, and then maybe they kind of took it a little too far, kind of pushed it. And then Tom, of course, has always had heavy, since he's done his Angels thing, he's had a lot of heavy auto-tune correction on his stuff. Like, I've heard Tom DeLonge live quite a few times, and I'll tell you what, he's never able to hit those notes one time I've ever heard him. But
definitely.
But that's okay. Like, I mean, he's like I said, he's not there to put on the exact album. He's there to put on a show, and like in that, he messes up playing guitar, he sings terrible, and it's a joke. They all laugh about it. So I think it adds to their kind of atmosphere of being called like crappy punk rock, pop punk rock. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, and lots of bands, like I said, they do use it, but when I saw them live, he didn't. You're right. He was kind of just raw, and it's rough, but it's okay because the thing about voices like Mark and Travis's, Tom's, excuse me, it's always the same thing I say about like Marilyn Manson. Like his voice is not very good, but it's good for Marilyn Manson. Like it works for his, what he does, and he doesn't have to be coming out here fucking, hitting 5-octave range and doing crazy shit. He's just does what he does, and it sounds good for the music he's making. Like Rob Zombie, terrible voice, but you know, I'm a huge Rob Zombie fan, as
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
And I don't think he's the greatest singer in the world, but I think what he does works. And I think you can say that about Tom for sure, because his voice has always fucking annoyed the piss out of me. But at the same time, it wouldn't be Blink without him. And, you know, when he's noticeably absent, it doesn't feel like Blink. And I don't like that. I mean, I would rather have him there than to not have him there. It's kind of like the annoying voice guy in 311, the guy that raps.
Oh
I
yeah.
love
Oh
311,
man.
and I love that they have that rapper dynamic, but his fucking voice also just pisses me off. So like, but I still don't want him gone. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I want him there because that's what makes their sound kind of.
No, that's exactly how Tom is. I mean, his one line is infamous. Just "Where are you?"
Yeah.
You know, like it's infamous
It's
among
ridiculous.
anybody. It's just insane, but it you know it's stuck around. It's his thing.
Yeah. And I think Blink is a band that endures because, you know, they're to the point where their logo is pretty noticeable in the rock realm, and they're a bigger band, so they still reach the younger fan base. And that was something I mentioned before too. Like, how are they going to figure out to be, you know, relevant in this day and age? And they're going to use the writing tactic as well, obviously. But I think they're a band that endures, and that's worth noting for them, you know. And I felt like throughout the album, though, there was always a song here and there where I was like, God, why couldn't you have just done something a little bit differently? But again, I mean, like, I'm not here to critique it like that. They're fucking making music, and you know,
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
doing
yeah,
their
they're
thing
doing
and
their
shit.
thing.
So like, I appreciate that, and there are tracks on here I like, and surprisingly, One More Time is still one of the stronger tracks. Like, I know we were talking about that earlier as well, because it's the most real, and it has some meaning behind both their friendship and their band. And I think the chorus is pretty, you know, important for their history. And as much as I don't usually like those acoustic slow songs, or just the, you know, the tearjerker tracks, not because I'm like some dead inside asshole, but like I like,
Cold as the winter blows.
you know, yeah, I like that that adrenaline shit. Like, you know, keep the, you know, your foot bumping and your head moving and shit. I'm usually about those types of tracks. That doesn't mean obviously that, you know, all slow songs are shit to me. I like a bunch of them, but
Yeah.
it's just songs like that are usually not my go-to. And for me to mention that song as a standout track on the album speaks to the rest of it in a way, you know, because it's like, there were those moments like I talked about, but I wish it was just, like I said, shorter. I just wanted like a much shorter album, and then I think it would have been, damn, this is quite the comeback. But too much filler kind of, I don't know, it turns me off a little bit.
So I do like this album. It's not in my top anything. It ranks lower. It's an okay album. But I think they just tried to play it too safe, and that's one of the biggest problems. And you can hear that in the album. Like, they had a lot of topics to talk about. Like, a lot has happened for them over the years, and I feel like there's only a couple songs, One More Time, Bad News, and another one that really kind of talk about it. You know, other side is about someone passing away. You know, One More Time is obviously about all their trials and tribulations as a band and why they can't seem to get it right. But so much has happened between them, and I feel like the album, and it's not a popular opinion, probably should have been a little darker, should have been a little more heavier to reflect on what they've done over their past. Like, we understand they're Blink, so they got to throw in, you know, some fun songs, but I feel like just the tone of the album for what they've gone through should have been quite a bit darker and not so playful, because then it kind of skims over everything, and I don't know, it just doesn't work out. And sometimes less is more, I guess. Like, they're trying to do more with their album, and then so they had to bring in writers, they had to do all this. Like, I feel like if they would have just kind of concentrated on what's been happening to them, it would have made for a more comprehensive and a better album, and one that didn't end up with a chorus that said ole ole ole. You know, maybe they would have thought of something different, because their Untitled album was their darkest album, and like I said, that's my favorite and arguably the best writing they've done. And it was all done by them. So again, that to me speaks volumes on just the quality of their albums if they get help, because the help doesn't understand like them.
That's true. That's an excellent point. And that happens in music all the time. And that's what kind of alienates a fan base sometimes. You know, like you'll get people that come in and, well, actually, I talk about it all the time when you and I talk about music, or when any of my friends and I talk about music. I'm always talking about, I mean, I don't want to use this term, but I'm going to use it just because I always do, is that sellout mentality where it's like you get a certain amount of popularity under your belt and you want it to keep replicating that because obviously it's financially, you know, great for you.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes not even just financially, but that song is etched in history and people are going to remember that shit a lot more than just like, oh, I wrote this song about some ex-girlfriend named Jessica that I'm not with anymore and I want the world to know. Like, nobody's really going to care about that shit, you know? Like,
No, you're right.
I mean, obviously there are good tracks about that type of stuff, and we need that in music as an outlet when we're feeling down, when we on that relatable relationship track. And there's actually one of those on here, which was funny. Actually, there's a couple of those on here, and I felt like with their age, I don't want to hear that shit from them anymore. Like, you know, if they're like in college, like when What's My Age Again came out, like college age, I expect that kind of track. But like on this album, like a good example is this When We Were Young. It's not necessarily relationshipy, even though it kind of is. And it,
well, it's a Tom song, so it's...
yeah, and it just was fucking like, I don't know, it was actually pretty lame. I'm not gonna lie. For their age, it's just like, come on, man. Like there's so much more that's happened to you guys in this amount of time that we could be hearing about, but with your style, and this is the shit that you're focusing on.
That's
and,
what I'm saying. Like, it's just, they had a lot going on, but this is what they chose to do. They went too far back and tried to mix, but they didn't do what people wanted to really hear. And, you know, people don't want to, like, people say they want to hear, like you said, they want to hear the same album all the time until it's the same album, and then they get mad. So it's kind of like, I feel like Linkin Park did it perfect. A lot of people do not like Minutes to Midnight, but I think it's a great album. And they took a chance.
I do not.
No, I think it's a great album because they took a chance, and then even their subsequent albums, if you listen to every one is different.
Right.
It's very different, and like they're not trying to alienate their fan base, but they said the same exact thing. Like, do you expect us to do Hybrid Theory over and over again? Like, we've got to grow as artists or we're gonna quit.
Yeah.
And you know, I feel like this is where Blink failed in, is they didn't stick to like what's happening now. They're stuck in, let's do it like this. Like, you know, let's talk about, we met at a party with your ex. Like you said, it just doesn't work when you're 50 years old, like, and a lot of your original fan base is close to the same age, or, you know, 10, 15 years difference. They don't want to hear that either. Most of them are married and stuff, and I understand they want to appeal to a younger crowd, but that's what new bands are for. That's why you have the newer all-time lows, the people who neck deep, the people who listen to Blink their whole lives and move forward with music. Like, it should be left to them to talk about that stuff. Maybe not anymore because now they're old, but but you know what I'm saying? Like,
well, and it's like I mentioned in the Eminem video too, like, who am I to say what he's gonna fucking write about? And the same thing can be applied here to Blink. Like, they can write wherever the fuck they want, but that just means I'm not necessarily gonna like it. And it was the same thing with Eminem. Some of that shit that he did that I was just like, again, and I know you're going for a theme here and it's supposed to tie all into that shit, but it's like, you brought Slim back, so maybe do something more modern with it and get some modern opinions. And he did here and there. You know, shout out to Fat People, you know, him talking shit about that. But like, Blink could have done the same thing. There's so many more like relevant things going on in the world that maybe they could have pulled from. And I don't know if that means to say that like they just don't have anything to say about it, or they don't want to go that political route. And I mean, I don't even mean political because I don't want that shit either. But like, but you know, just like, the world has changed in a lot of ways, even when talking about emotions or what inspires a song, you know, with the internet around and that constant connectivity with the world. And, you know, there might just be some things you read from day to day that like, oh shit, that inspires me. And you know, maybe that did happen, but to me, it kind of sounds like the same shit over and over again on this album. And like, not necessarily in the worst way, because again, you have that fan base that you want to appease in that regard, and I'm sure that's where the praise for this album came from. And I know everyone seemed to really like it, so I'm happy for that. Like, don't get me wrong, and I don't want to sound like that old man that's just like, I miss old Blink, because I don't. You know, like I said, I wasn't like a huge fan of them anyway, but I do like a bunch of their songs, and I think they have a nice, place in history in those boxes I was talking about that I was putting them in with like Green Day and Offspring. And I mean, I like both of those bands too. I mean, I like all of those bands. I don't love all of those bands. I always tell my brother that I'm into that commercial pop punk more than that a hardcore punker would be like, oh, you like Green Day? Like, I get it. Like if you don't like Green Day and you want to listen to the Vandals or the more underground shit, like
Yeah.
I get that, and that's kind of what punk is about to a lot of people. But I'm just listen. I love good songwriting, so I'm looking for all those different styles and personalities to write new songs that I'm like I said I can bob my head to. I mean, they can be deep too. But for lyricism, I always think with rock and roll, it doesn't have to be super perfect. I mean, it shouldn't be as fucking lazy as Olay.
No, yeah.
But like with rock and roll, you have a lot more liberties than when you're focusing on rap. I mean, at least if you're an old head or that you want that like you know more lyrical rap, not necessarily the stupid lyrical miracle shit,
Yeah.
which is what everyone says these days when they get too over the top with it. But just something with substance. I think sometimes you can lean more to that because you got a lot more words to get your point across and stuff like that. And with rock and roll and Blink and stuff in particular, I think you can get away with saying less, meaning more a lot of the time. Like less is more, and I feel like that's the biggest problem here is I'm hearing all the same stuff over and over again, like I had mentioned, and I like I said, not really for me. Like I said, I guess overall in the album, the production musically is great though, and I didn't know it was produced by Travis until you brought that up. So
Yeah, he produced the whole album.
I remember thinking like, damn, musically this shit sounds crisp. Like it is really well recorded, and it sells Blink 182. I'll tell you that. Like if you had never heard them before and you were like, "Oh, what does Blink 182 sound like?" Start with this album. It'd probably fucking show you exactly who they are all in one album as opposed to maybe jumping around. It's just weird to talk about this stuff as an older guy because, I can still remember when like What's My Age Again came out and shit, and I liked it. It was just like that summertime pop punk bop. You're like, hell yeah.
I know. And it was also in a different time too. Like for whatever reason, back then and even some into the early 2000s, we have music that is still revered, where these days it's a lot harder because everybody tries to put out so much so fast to keep relevant that it's hard to really write a song that stays.
Yeah,
And
definitely a timeless track.
yeah, a timeless track. They just these days it's not as common. Like right now we have one, Not Like Us, Kendrick. He dropped that song, and that will be a song that goes on to go with Eminem and any of his disses, like Girls to Limp Bizkit or his Kill Shot to MGK. Like that song will go down with those as some of the best diss tracks in rap history. Maybe not in a commercial way, even though everybody knows the song, everybody sings it, it's a pretty impactful, but
it's like commercial in a different way.
But
with the internet and everything.
It'll be just one of those tracks that probably lives on for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And
that's what you look for on an album like this, I think. I mean, as a casual listener and a hardcore fan of Blink, and that brings me back to the playlist thing. Like, what songs are standing out here that I really want to listen to all the time? And there's a couple for me, for sure. Like, I'm looking at them. Like, Blink Wave, Blink Wave is a good one. I kind of liked Edging. I mean, the chorus is, again, a little bit iffy, but verse-wise, it's got that Blink. There was a song I was looking for on here that I felt like it was the perfect representation of the Travis Mark back and forth. And I don't remember exactly what it was. I mean, I wrote all this down like right before I got here, but it's like, I know I mentioned it already, but if I didn't, More Than You Know, that song is pretty damn good to me, actually.
I think that song is one of the standouts.
Yeah. That's more of what you were talking about. Like, I'll remember that song because it's popped up twice now that we've talked, as well as like Anthem Part 3. I think that the one that fits in the trilogy like we talked about in the beginning of the video.
Absolutely.
I love when bands do that, like lots of bands will have that part 1, 2, 3. Obviously, Coheed and Cambria is a big example. I mean, obviously their entire story connecting, but that, part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It was just like Metallica's
Unforgivens.
Unforgivens, yeah. Unforgivens. I feel they got better and better.
Yeah.
For me.
Oh, I could see that. That's an interesting conversation to have, actually, because I like the original Unforgiven the most. But the third one, if you would just never heard the other one before, you'd almost get the same vibe from it.
Yeah.
Second one kind of, but yeah, exactly like that. Like Anthem Part 3, definitely. I mean,
They all stand on their own, but you can hear the kind of connection they have when you listen to the songs.
yeah.
And I feel
Yeah.
that's hard, and few bands have done it, like, Metallica, Blink 182 in a way with these anthems, and then Silverstein with their How the Wind Blows. They did a back to back, 6 songs one, 6 songs the other, from both different point of views of a couple.
Right.
And although they're different songs, when you listen to them, like track 1 to track 7,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like the songs are connected. Like they're different, but you can hear the similarities and just the different point of view. So it's just impressive when people can do that when they write songs, especially like with Metallica decades later.
Mm-hmm.
Like to keep that same kind of energy going 30 years, 20 years later. It's impressive. It's just,
Oh, yeah.
I also really love Unforgiven 3. I think that piano at the beginning is
For
just
sure.
so good. And I think the chorus on that and his singing has gotten just incredibly better.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, like, I like all three. I think they're a strong trilogy of tracks. And it's always kind of hard to say you ripped yourself off, you know? And sometimes I think bands will do that. And they're. I think I did bring that up on the car
Yes,
as
you
well,
did.
like the Adam
Adam
song
song.
thing. Yeah, this "You Don't Know What You Got," that song. Now, I'm not necessarily saying it's the same notes or anything. I'm just saying I listened to it on my big stereo for the last time right before I came over,
Yeah.
and I put it on, the big speakers, the 4 setup one, and just listened to all the parts and absorbed it one more time. And I didn't notice at the first 11, 12 listens, but on that listen I heard very similar note structures to Adam's song, and then like it was weird. It just felt really reminiscent of it, and I feel like you're trying to like either rip yourself off or replicate the success of an older song, and it's like, don't do that. Just write what comes naturally to you. And again, it's easier said than done, I know, but there are tons of bands that
Absolutely.
do it. There are tons
Yeah.
of examples,
Oh, yeah.
that like, I mean, we can talk about different bands and artists all day, but Sadistic is a good one to bring up because I think he does have a style all in his own, but
Absolutely.
the songs will sound different every time. Like he almost reinvents his own wheel a lot. He'll change up his flows, he'll change things like that. Or even in the music realm, like bands like The Strokes. The Strokes, they don't really stick to one formula their entire career. They keep changing it up, but it still sounds like The Strokes,
Yeah, yeah.
And Blink could be doing that and be falling into that like respectable circle of like, we are passionately writing new music that fits our themes and everything about us, but we're still trying new things. And it's really dangerous middle ground, I know, like we talked about, because if you go too far on the other side of the spectrum, then people are going to hate it no matter what.
Yeah.
And you want to avoid that, but your hardcore fan base, I mean, like, I always feel like bands put too much thought into that. Just make the album you want to make. Like, I'm a huge fan of Deftones. I don't feel like Deftones have ever tried to lean into what their fan base wants, even if they want White Pony 16 more times or Metallica. They want Master of Puppets 38 more times. They're kind of just like, fuck you guys. We've grown. Those albums are still good. We'll honor them. We'll play those songs live, but we're going to move on a little bit.
Yeah.
And, Blink didn't do that to me for here. The songs, like with the Matt Skiba stuff, those sound more experimental, almost forcefully, because you have Alkaline Trio, dude in the mix trying to come up with Blink stuff. And I almost appreciate that more because, yeah, it wasn't the original members, but it was different for them and they might stand out more. And again, I need to go back and listen to those. We need to do the deep dive of all the albums, like I said.
No, definitely. It's hard to say with the Matt Skiba albums because I definitely feel like with California, he was held back just musically, and they were trying to come back after quite a while, 5-year hiatus pretty much. And, they're trying to introduce this new character, this new guy who, I'll be honest, Alkaline Trio is not the most famous band, so a lot of casual Blink listeners will have never known who he is.
Yeah.
So then they come introduce this brand new guy and they say, hey, we're Blink, this is our second singer. I think they played it too safe with California because of that reason. They didn't want to make such a different sound that people are like, oh, we wish Tom was back, even though a lot of the reception they got was that.
Well,
But
yeah.
you know, that's how it's going to go when you change a singer in any band. You know, there's always going to be Chiodos, for example. They had one singer after Craig Owens, and everybody didn't like it so much he got booted. But
I like
you know,
Illuminaudio. I don't give a fuck. I think it's tight. I mean, like, it happens in music all the time, though. Like, that's one thing that people need to understand. And we just talked about it with Kiss before we hit record here. I only like the stuff with Peter and Ace, and I really don't care about when they, start experimenting with different rock guitarists. And do I think it's cool still? Yeah. Do I still like some of those songs? Absolutely. But it's not what makes me love Kiss, and I'm also guilty of wanting Tom to come back. I did want him to come back, I mean, that's Blink-182 to me. It is. You want that original member feeling. It's not, there's no I in team, right? It's like the same concept in the band. Like, there's no one personality. They make up a sound. And with some bands, like bands like Norma Jean or Devil Wears Prada, certain bands where they're not super known for their individuality member wise, you can sit there and change that drummer out 4 or 5 times and no one's really going to notice the difference, because for that music you're looking for that experienced metal double kick pedal drummer who's good at his variations and doing that type of stuff, and that's fine. But bigger bands like the Rolling Stones, you're not going to get rid of Mick Jagger, you're not going to get rid of Paul McCartney, you're not going to get rid of James Hetfield, like that. They're a core part of the sound. Like, think about Primus. If you take Les Claypool out, there is no fucking Primus. Like so. And I kind of feel that way about this anyway. Like, I do appreciate the Matt Skiba albums, but I don't think they're Blink. They should have just named the band something new, did like a spin-off thing, which would have given them more freedom too, and not pigeonhole them like you're saying.
Absolutely, I think they should have. But I think they just Mark and Travis just really wanted the band to go on, and they were tired of waiting on one person who couldn't commit to even getting in the studio and recording, would commit to a tour. And that's just a Tom thing. That's kind of the big thing that split them early on, is he didn't want to tour anymore, and they agreed to another like 4 months of touring, and he said no, I back out. And then a bunch of people lost 4 months of work, like a whole bunch of stuff happened. And that's not the core thing that split them early on. There was a bunch more, but that's part of what happened.
Right.
And it's hard to know.
Yeah. And that's something that I don't think a lot of fans, well, maybe hardcore fans do, but a lot of casual listeners of bands don't take into consideration the personal turmoil that can happen amongst bands. Some of them are world famous, like Pink Floyd and shit, like the clashing of those two personalities just kills the band, and then they're done. But sometimes I think it's okay to walk away too. Like, if music is what you love and, you want to keep doing it, I guess more power to you. And, I'm not saying Blink should hang it up. I don't mean that at all. But like, some bands have never hung it up. You got the Rolling Stones are still out there shaking their shit at 80. And they just came out with a new song not that long ago. I mean, even they're old as fuck and they're still just doing it. So if I was a rocker and I was a successful rocker, I wouldn't give it up. I would just keep doing that shit till I was a goddamn corpse.
I would take a different approach. I definitely wouldn't bring other people in to write for me.
Oh, no, for sure.
If you're having trouble thinking about a song or thinking of how to finish it or something that goes with it, maybe it's not the song you need to write. Maybe you need to scrap the idea and start over. Sometimes that's the process. Sometimes a painter gets 3/4 of the way through their painting, hates it, has to start all over. And then, maybe the brighter picture comes, but I feel...
Happens in film, too. I got to do reshoots, I didn't like how that went down. That's why there's multiple takes and multiple edits and...
Exactly.
And... There's still a lot of examples, though, of outside writers coming in and doing them a great justice, too, So it definitely, it works on both ways, especially in the music world. And when you think about things like Frank Sinatra being a huge, pop artist is the wrong thing, but a really big name in music for the time.
Yeah.
He didn't really write most of his own music, at least not lyrically. He was able to, figure out and orchestrate things in his head a certain way, but he's taking someone else's idea and making it his own. And, I guess I can see arguments and schools of thought for both. But I think when you're a band like Blink, when you're like pop punk or you're punkish, because they definitely try to remind you of that on this album a few times with those like super short tracks that I also always get a kick out of. So I'm not
I
even
think they're
slamming
funny.
those tracks. Yeah, they're funny.
They're always funny.
But like they always want to try to remind you like we're still punk with those songs, and it's like yeah, but you were never really that punk. I mean, if you were, I wouldn't like any of your shit. I'll tell you that. Like
That's why the reason I don't care for their earlier catalog is because it was a lot more punk. It's just not my style.
yeah, I mean, again, I have nothing against punk, and there are some underground punk songs I like, and I guess underground's the wrong word, but the more raw, not overly produced, like I mean, and there's obviously historical bands that are punk that I like, or at least considered punk, like the Clash and Sex Pistols and shit like that.
Absolutely.
Even the Ramones, I grew up hating them, but I've grown to appreciate what I appreciate by them, and that's cool. But,
I mean, NoFX is more punk than they are pop, but they were the kind of bridge that spawned the new bands to be like, I can mix this with new age and punk still and have something that works, which is great. But onto the writing thing, like I don't think it's a bad thing if someone helped you write something, or if like like with Kanye West, he wrote the Gold Digger for I believe Rihanna, and whatever happened, but he decided to do the song himself, and look, it was a hit.
oh yeah,
But that's okay. Like if you have somebody, if you're like, hey, I have this great song, I'm not going to use it, but I think you'd be great for it, that's fine. Like you have one song.
yeah.
But if your whole album is you getting help with every song, or every song's got 2 or 3 writers that are outside the band, obviously, I feel like I said before, it just takes away from that. Because like I think it's okay every now and then. Like I said with that song, if Rihanna would have done it, who knows if it probably still would have been a hit.
Right.
And it's just that song. But like you said, I know Michael Jackson didn't write most of his songs lyrically anyways. And, he kicked a lot of them down, and that's where Justin Timberlake got quite a few of his songs.
Yeah.
And, that's fine. Like, I get that those artists.
Michael Jackson's kind of a mixed bag though, because like he could write them. Yeah. He did write a bunch of his bigger ones, but like he's that artist that we were talking about that's like so big. If he kicks you down a track, you're like,
absolutely,
I got a Michael track.
Yeah, I got a Michael track.
I'm off to the races now, and that's pretty cool. And Blink,
absolutely,
maybe they could consider doing that for other punk bands too. Like if they still have the urge to write music like that, but they're not there spiritually anymore or emotionally, they could just write pop punk songs for up and coming pop punk acts, and maybe they have.
No, they have. Yeah,
I might be talking out my fucking ass.
Mark Hoppus, a lot of his time away from Blink, he produced bands. He produced, I believe it's My Dinosaur album for Motion City Soundtrack. He was the producer on that, and I know he has writing credits on it. Travis has a ton of writing credits on both of MGK's rock albums,
right?
Tickets to My Downfall and Mainstream Sellout. I think that's what it's called. But either way, like they've been out doing other things. I think Tom's the one that's been more seclusive in his music, like doing his Angels thing, plus doing the Aliens thing and his Company to the Stars and stuff. That dude's constantly busy.
Yeah,
it's even a shock he can do Blink now. But
yeah,
it's just it's hard with him. I think they should, if you want my real opinion, I don't think they should have got back together.
No,
because he's about as flaky as Frosted Flakes. So they may have done this song, one more time, this album about coming together and all this stuff, but we are who we are, and he's going to do what he's committed to, and he's already proven time again that Blink's not the top of his priority list, and if these other things get in, need his attention, he's going to give it to that. Yeah. So if this is their last album, I'm okay with that. It's not my favorite, but I'm okay if this is where they leave off. If it's three of the originals, they put it out there, and they're like, we're good, wash their hands of it, that's fine. But
yeah,
the uncertainty that Tom always brings along now is like, okay, so we got this album, is it going to be another 8, 9, 10 years before we get another one with you guys? Because either you can't agree, you can't all get in the studio together, or, Tom has something going on, or, God forbid, one of them dies.
Which almost happened twice.
Exactly, I know, exactly, yeah. They one
not that I'm
Blink,
laughing at that, but...
one thing about Blink, they're survivors, I guess, they're hard to kill Blink.
And that's what makes that one song, One More Time, the best, the best song on the album.
No, I absolutely agree, and it's funny you say... that song you don't like, You Don't Know What You've Got, that sounds kind of like Adam's song.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that song. Like it could be because it does sound like Adam's song, and I really like Adam's song, but
Oh, Adam's song's a
I
great
really
song.
like that song.
I mean, and bands do that all the time. Like I said, Green Day,
Yeah.
he's reinvented the same fucking riff like 40 goddamn times. And it's like, well, whatever works for you. But I didn't notice it until that last listen. And I was like, suspicious here. But no, yeah, for sure. And like I said, I'm not completely a hater of this album. I mean, just looking back at my notes, it's real 50-50, which is why, overall, I think the album is like a 5 out of 10 for me. And it might have been like a 7 out of 10 had it been shorter or an EP or something. I might have been a little bit more keen on it, like I said. But right now, 2-3 songs for my playlist, maybe 4 tops. And I usually hope that it's between like 6 to 8. Because no album is perfect. I mean,
No.
that's not true. There are perfect albums out there, but they're like so much fewer and far between. A lot of the times it's either great. Well, I mean, it works in all spectrums. There's really bad albums, there's good albums, there's great albums, and for me, this album is kind of middle of the road. Like, I don't think it's trash or anything, but like, I don't know.
What is your least favorite song? Like the song you just want to skip every time it comes on.
That childhood song, dude. I know it's the last track, so it's not a hard one to skip. It's just like, but like that song to me was pretty lame. I mean, I don't know. It might be a tie, like a 3-way tie between that song, Turpentine, and what was that one that I brought up a minute ago where it was Terrified. I don't like that song either. I don't know.
So that's funny. You don't like both the songs that are the closest to Boxcar Racer we'll probably ever see again.
And I was not a huge fan of Boxcar Racers, so
that makes sense. I mean,
like there you go. Like
I think that's the best Tom project he has. Like if I think about even Blink outside the Untitled album, I think the Boxcar Racer album is his best work hands down. Even the song that he brings Mark on for, Elevator, I think it's absolutely phenomenal. And I think that album and Plus 44's album is better than anything Blink has ever done together. Angels is Angels. Like I don't hate it. I used to really like them, but the older I've gotten, I just don't like the gimmicky Tom DeLonge thing. Like,
I get that.
oh wow, like he likes to do those vowel singing, or I
You
don't
mean
know
like
what you call
enchanting Tom DeLonge?
it. Yeah, like he's like trying to get you to do something you don't want to, by singing to you like that. Like,
Hell yeah.
yeah. So, but
He did. He got me to listen to another Blink-182 album.
oh yeah, no, absolutely, he did. He probably got a lot of people with this one. Definitely ranks on a lower list of Blink-182. I'd probably put him down there, above Dude Ranch, but even below California and Nine.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's got its high points, but just because Tom DeLonge is back doesn't make the album magically better. Just because they have, again, things that they didn't even really talk about, but they mention, about their lives, what's going on. It just didn't do it for me in a Blink album. And I've listened to it probably 150 times. I don't know how many times.
I believe that with you, yeah.
Because
I totally
when I
fucking
listen
believe
to
that with you.
albums, I try to listen to them a ton of times, because the first time I'll hate it or really love it, and then about the 5th, 8th, 9th, 10th time through, I'm like, either I'm like, ooh, actually this is really good, or I just kind of lose my feeling for it.
Well, yeah, and like it's good to reassess them, like you don't
Yeah.
want to make a spitfire judgment every time, because sometimes albums are slow burners and slow growers on you, and you're like, well, yeah, I hated it at first, and it felt like this album was going to be better to me, and I didn't actually expect to dislike it as much as I do. Because again, like I'm a pretty casual Blink listener, so when I tune into them, I kind of just hope for a certain thing, I guess, which is somewhere in between old them but more mature them. And that middle ground, I feel like they do reach on tracks on this album and Neighborhoods, and so. And again, I'm not Mr. fucking mature. Like, I don't think everything's got to be super serious.
No,
I'm just
no.
saying, like, I want to, I guess, to hear them sound like they're having fun making an album instead of just formulaically making an album, which is what this feels like.
Yes.
And I'm definitely happy to have a new Blink album, but for me, it falls short. And
So, and that's something that I don't understand what got lost in the translation. Because if you go back to Untitled, that's one of their more serious albums. It's very dark tone, a little heavy for a Blink album.
Mhm.
But they were still able to be Blink. They had a whole song feeling this about fucking.
Mhm.
You know, so they're still having fun, but they did it. Even that song is a more matured song for Blink, and the whole song is just about having sex. You know, and you go into their other songs, and they've got a lot deeper, a lot darker with their music. Like the Not Now bonus track is about someone seeing themselves die and not wanting to leave.
Right.
You know, so they had ideas and mature ones, but they were still able to have fun. And I don't know where that changed along the way, where they felt like they can't have this darker, more mature tone and still have fun
Right.
without having too much of one or the other.
Right.
Like I just don't know what happened. Like, and I think it's right. I think you probably hit it right on the head. I think it's their approach at formulaic music and not naturally letting it happen.
Mhm. It's time for a new Blink album. You know,
Yeah, like
instead of
we've got to get this done. Like we've got to do this, or like we got to sound like this. It's just,
Mhm.
I think that affects the whole album, and I think that's why it ranks so low. Because even like you said, even with Mark and Matt from Alkaline, they at least tried a little bit different, especially in the second album and the deluxe version of California. They did a little bit more than they did. Like
Yeah.
they took a little bit more from Matt and kind of incorporated it. Where this one, it just doesn't feel like that. It feels like too much treading over the same ground in a new style. Just like that song you said sounds like Adam's song. Like they kind of just, you have to listen to it and you'll catch it, but the album is kind of just nothing, I guess. Like, I don't know. I don't really know how to say it about this album. I've wanted to like it a lot, but I just can't. I have these feelings about it.
I am surprised where it ranks for you, being a Blink album with the original members, for sure.
Me more than you, man.
Yeah.
Me more than you.
But that's interesting, though. Like I said, it speaks more to what we were talking about, and that, you know, the hardcore listener versus the casual listener. Like, I'm cool with it. I wouldn't even rank it with their other albums because I probably wouldn't even bother. They're not a band I'd rank their albums with, I don't
Yeah,
think.
yeah,
Because,
yeah.
you know, like I said, they're cherry pickers for me, where I'm like, you know, Dude Ranch has got Josie. I love that song. And then maybe they're cliche songs to like, but, you know, what's
They're
my
not
age
famous for a
again?
reason.
You know, yeah, exactly.
They
Like,
get
yeah,
famous for being
exactly.
crappy, you know?
Like I said, I'm a big fan of just the ability to write a great song in whatever genre it is you're doing. Like, how well can you do it, and how many times do I want to listen to it? And that's just where my opinion comes from. I never think a song is trash. I respect, you know, pretty much every artist in history has at least a couple songs I like. I'm not one of those people that's like, fuck every song by that band, except for like Five Finger Death Punch and shit like that. Fuck those guys. But, you know, shit like that. But, and I'm sure I'll catch shit for that, but like, I don't really care. I mean, honestly, like, I just don't like the guys. I mean, I already heard Pantera, and it was like 30, 40 years ago at this point. So, you know, Five Finger Death Punch is just one of those bands I don't give a shit about. And there are bands like that, but overall, I'd say like 90% of music, whether it be underground or popular, I can find some songs by those bands that I think are cool within the confines of their genre.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're a better man than me.
Yeah, not everyone's like that, for sure. I mean, I don't,
No.
you know, I mean, that's why it'll baffle people sometimes when I'm like super into classic rock or metal, but I still love a bunch of hip hop. And,
Yeah.
but, you know, I think it's fair to, well, fair is the wrong word. Fair makes it seem like there's an expectation of others, but like, I just think it's cool to like kind of a little mix of everything. But I definitely know not everyone's like that. I mean,
No, fuck country.
I was gonna say,
Dude, I don't care. I can write a country song for you right now.
I mean, no, absolutely. It's not, especially modern country.
Oh,
like,
modern, it's even harder.
But
Or it's even easier.
yeah, and you know, trying to merge it with other genres and shit. But it works for some bands, and like I said, more power to them. I'm never a hater of somebody's success. Always say that. Like, you do you.
I am Sexy Red. I don't know if you heard of her, but I am hateful of her success because how she got any airtime blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely. I mean, Lil Xan, fucking shit like that. And then I mean, there
But
are
that's
bands
just
like
me.
that too.
We're also an older generation, and the newer
Mm-hmm.
generation, Gen Z, and all that. Their opinions are vastly different than ours, as ours are from our parents.
Yeah, for sure.
But,
That's why we're old heads when it comes to hip hop and shit. like-
Exactly.
But I mean, like, there's still modern artists we both like, obviously, you know.
Oh.
But I'm just saying.
You know, my personal opinion is I don't really like Kendrick.
Popular opinion for sure.
Not because he's not lyrically great, because he is. He's smart, and he is a good rapper. I just don't like his voice.
Kendrick
like some
Lamar
song-
episode, definitely.
Yeah, I don't like his voice. It's a little weird, but yeah. Just, here's something for you. It's not about Blink, but just I'm curious because you brought it up a little bit earlier about, like, you know, just the best albums, or everybody hates an album. But what's an album that everybody loves that you don't? Everybody, like you, it's hard for you to find somebody who doesn't like this album, but you just do not like it.
Damn, that's not a bad question at all. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I know there is that type of shit for movies, like
Oh, absolutely.
like Jurassic Park. You know, everyone fucking loves that movie, and I'm always like, pfft. But musically, damn, I don't know. That's a tough one. You kind of put me on the spot with that.
I know it's an on-the-spot question, a tough one, but I was just thinking, what if one stands out when you think of, like, one everybody talks to you about, and you're just like, dude, I do not like this album.
Yeah, it's just a great question. Like, I would have to say first thing that pops off my head is Radiohead. Anything by fucking Radiohead. I just don't like those
Whole
guys.
group.
The world loves their albums, and I think, you know, again, maybe one or two songs here and there, but they're not what everything the world makes them out to be. They're so fucking overrated to me. It's crazy. And then like Beyonce, same thing with Beyonce. And you know, I love lots of pop music. I love lots of female artists, but Beyonce ain't it to me. I don't see the big fucking deal. So I don't know. It's hard to give you just one album because, like we talked about, I pretty much hit all genres, and I like at least one by everyone. If I had to put it, though, if I had to, it would be Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette, just to give you an actual definitive answer. Everyone loves that album, and I think there's a couple good songs on that album, but a couple good songs does not make a great album. And that's a real big misconception, I think, with people. When they acclaim an entire album, you're going to tell me every track is gold. I don't want to skip it. Because again, those albums do exist. Like, we bring up Metallica a few times in this, you know, thing. Master of Puppets is universally loved all the way through, and I get that every single song. And that's not just because I'm a metalhead or I love metal, but that's a good example of an unskippable album. Like, I don't want to skip any tracks. Or, you know, another good example would be like any album by Garbage. To me, I think Garbage utilizes their time. So things like that. But yeah, to give you a definitive, Jagged Little Pill.
I'll be honest with you, I do not know who any of that is you mentioned. I know who they are, but I've never listened to any of that. Like Radiohead, I don't know. You mentioned the Creep song. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know Alessandro Morissette.
You're better off. I'm jealous. Fuck. I wish I didn't know Radiohead.
So
like
I don't
that.
know. So I don't know, but maybe I'm gonna have to look into these.
Well, what's yours? I'm curious.
Mine is Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon.
You know, that's a good one.
I do not think that album is as great as everybody and their mother who listens to it and who doesn't listen to it but just wants to sport the cover art. It is just, to me, an overrated album. It's got some good songs, but as you most perfectly quoted, some good songs do not make a great album. And I think that album is not as great as everybody says. I do not care for that album.
Unpopular opinion for sure.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
But like, I get it for sure, and that's a great answer. That's a great answer. I mean, you know, and that happens with a lot of bands. You'll see people wearing Nirvana shirts, and there are those videos online of people going up to them like, "Can you even name one Nirvana song?" And they're like, "No." It's like, okay, well, I don't really care. I see there's a big outrage with people like, "Why are you wearing band shirts for bands you don't like?" But it's like, whatever, dude. It's a shirt. A shirt's a shirt. If you like the image on it, or you know, most of them don't even seem to know who the artist is a lot of the time, and it's like, whatever. But
I mean, yeah, it comes out to just what you like. If you think it looks cool, like,
Yeah,
I
fuck
mean,
it.
there was a time when you had to pick your album based on the cover art. You just had to, this cover art's sweet, and it was like a 50-50 if it was going to be good or not.
yeah,
You know,
No,
so
for sure.
I mean, it makes sense, and I don't hate on people for that, but it's just one of, like, that picture in particular is just like the Nirvana baby. Like,
Yeah.
it's everywhere. Whoever loves it, hates it, or doesn't even know what the hell it is, it's there. You know?
Right.
And that's fine. I think the cover art for the album is better than the album.
Whoa, another unpopular opinion right there. Nirvana would probably be an episode for sure.
Oh no, I was talking about Pink Floyd.
Oh.
Nirvana's album is great. I think it's great. Not my
Okay.
style of music, but I think Nirvana has their place. And a lot of, like you said, a lot of my favorite band's favorite band is Nirvana.
Oh, for sure, yeah. No, but yeah, Pink Floyd falls into that category where,
No,
like you were
absolutely.
saying, everyone just likes it because it's fucking Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, but do you actually like it?
And I don't know when that happened. Like, maybe it was just an era thing. Like, when that album dropped, it was just for that era. It was incredible.
Yeah.
But I think when you were Wish You Were Here, the EP is infinitely better than anything Pink Floyd has ever done. It was 5 songs, I think it is.
Mhm.
And Shine On You Crazy Diamond Part 1 and 2 are probably, I think, for me, the best songs of that era of Pink Floyd. I just think those 2 songs are absolutely incredible.
So yeah, they're one of those bands for you. Where like they're your Radiohead kind of. It sounds like you kind of
I
like songs by
I
them,
like Pink
but-
Floyd. I don't
but-
think they're bad. Like I can't remember the one with the flying pig on the cover. Animal.
Animal. Yeah,
I think that album's good.
yeah.
It's a heavily acoustic album, which was very odd, I guess,
Mhm.
for Pink Floyd, but it was cool. It was good.
Yeah.
But I just don't care for that era of music. Like, I'm not a huge 70s, 80s, sometime into the 90s fan of music. Like, I like some of the albums, like old Metallica's great, new Metallica's like pretty good. But I've never, like, you like Motley Crue, I don't listen to any of that.
I like old Motley Crue.
I don't know the difference, you know. So I don't know, but I've listened to the music, like Poison. You know, I know they're not the same, but in that era of like 80s, you know, hair metal, you know, that other stuff coming out, the like Metallica and stuff. It's just not my era. Like, I'm unfortunately the 2000s is my era of music that I enjoy the most.
Hey, I
From
mean, it was-
rap to screamo,
Good era.
emo to, you know, just regular rock.
Mhm.
And all that. Like, I think it was just a great era.
Yeah, it definitely had its merits, and I bring up that era all the time. Like shit, like, you know, we lived through the new metal era, we lived through the
Absolutely.
emo era,
Perfect.
the metalcore era.
Perfect fucking examples.
Yeah.
Those eras, although they're not as popular now like they were then when they took the world by storm, but I just love that era. It's just
Yeah,
so much variety. It's like the video game industry in that era too. There was so much variety, so many people trying different things and seeing what stuck.
Mhm.
And that's what happened with music. Same with movies. Movies were crazy. Movies got crazy for a while, and I just think that, you know, that's my era. And it's not a popular opinion. Like, people love the classics, and I get it. Just not for me. Just not my style. I look for more in different ways, I guess.
yeah. No, I get you. And that's gonna make for some great episodes. Because
Absolutely.
as I'm fucking thinking for some shit right now, I'm like, oh man,
Oh yeah.
there's gonna be a lot to talk about music-wise, 70s, 80s, and cinema-wise for me because
No. Yeah.
those are big eras for me. I mean, I also really love the 90s and the, you know, the 2000s. And,
80s is great
you know,
too. Like, I'm not for movie wise. I'm not discrediting the 80s and the 90s because they had absolutely great movies, like the Batman movies
Right.
in the 80s. Well, the first one's 89, and then you've got, you know, Alien, you've got Predator, you've got all these great things, Halloween, that have all come to this era, but they originated there. So, like, and some of those movies are just absolute classics.
Yeah.
But I just favor those movies in that time period.
Yeah,
Which
understandable.
might be because of my age, probably a lot.
I think it's that way for all
lot
of
of
us.
people, yeah.
You know, like some of us were just growing up during that time period, so we were highly impressionable, and that still
Mm-hmm.
happens till this day. And that's why, you know, obviously we aren't going to understand things like people loving Lil Baby and Travis Scott, and
Yeah, exactly.
you know, like
Yeah.
it's not our era. And you know, I've heard some songs by both of them or some features, and I like them here and there. And like I said, I can say that all day about all artists. I'm just all about music, so it's there. But there are those dominant decades that we'll definitely go into. We might even just do whole episodes on the decades, just
standouts.
broad strokes, yeah, because obviously, it's a deep dive, but that'd be such a deep dive. We'd have to just scratch the surface for
Exactly.
certain things. But maybe we could do different segments where it's like, popular 80s stuff, not so popular 80s stuff, and just all the best of both worlds and shit like that. But, there's plenty of time for that. And, I think that the overall conversations with art, is fun. So
Yeah.
having someone to actually have that conversation with on a podcast versus kind of just spitting it out myself is definitely interesting. So
No, I think this is going to be great.
yeah,
we're
absolutely.
Going to touch a lot of stuff.
Hell yeah. And for everyone listening, we appreciate you tuning in, and some new additions to the show will be, we might start using some audio samples and sound effects and some things that we've been playing with to keep things more interesting for everyone. And maybe interesting is the wrong word, but just give it some pizzazz, a little
Also, if you
bold.
have any suggestions on topics you'd like to hear us get into, might as well mention it.
Yeah.
We'll take it into consideration.
Absolutely. I'd love for us to be that podcast where the listeners get involved, like sending us
Absolutely.
emails and, hey, you guys should talk about this. So meaning, if you like hearing us talk about shit.
Yeah.
If you don't, then you wouldn't,
If you don't,
understandable.
Get
But,
the hell away from us.
Yeah, for sure. But we thank you all for listening to episode 3 of Blink-182's, most recent album, One More Time. And my closing thoughts for that are, like I said, just overall could have been better, I don't know what your closing thoughts
Absolutely.
are on it, but that's kind of where I land.
It lands on that just what could have really been.
Yeah,
And this is what we got.
absolutely.
That's all I have for now.
For sure. All right. Well, everyone, we thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week for what will be a mystery episode, as it always is. We're never going to tell you ahead of time, but
I don't even know myself.
exactly. All right, everyone, take it easy.